Well, howdy. The two that I brought before was in 1978. This one here is in 1979. And the title of it is The Hillside Trees. You'll notice that about all of the parables that he gave me had animals and trees and stuff like that in it. That's because I absolutely love the outdoors. Always have, ever since I was just a young'un. I've always loved getting in the woods and hunting and fishing. And so he knew I would understand these parables that he gave me using animals and trees and all. But this is called The Hillside Trees. The 10 small seedlings had lived a sheltered life. The master planter had planted the seeds and had carefully maintained just the right conditions for their growth. Under these conditions, their growth had been rapid. Now they wondered where the master planter was taking them. He had been walking the earth for some time now, looking for the place to transplant them. It must be a place where the conditions will be just right, he said. Finally, he stopped and stood for quite some time looking at this one hillside. Yes, I believe this is just the right spot, he said. Immediately the master planter went to work planting the seedlings in just the right way. They were planted in a way that none of them would shade out the other and far enough apart that one would not rob the other's nourishment. Then stepping back and checking the seedlings from every angle, he smiled and said, "There. That should do it. All the conditions here would be just right to make strong, beautiful trees out of each one of you. It is very important that you stay where I have planted you. Farewell, little ones," he said. "I will return at the appointed time and look upon your beauty and splendor. But a word of warning I leave with you, little ones. Beware of the evil ones with their words of wisdom. Wise seem their words, but doom and destruction is their destiny." With this warning, the master planter left them. Everything was quiet for a short time as the seedlings looked over their new home. "Hey, I'm uncomfortable," one of the seedlings complained. "Yeah, this ground is rocky," another one grumbled. "Man, my roots are getting cold," whispered another. "I want to go back where I came from," whined still another. Back and forth, round and round went the complaints. All complained, all but 2 of the little seedlings. These 2 were just as uncomfortable as the rest, but instead of grumbling and complaining, they merely looked at each other, shrugged their little limbs, settled in their roots, and went to growing. Growing was a lot different from what it was in the beginning. Before they were sheltered and pampered, but now the growing conditions were different. During some days, the hot sun beamed down on them, causing much discomfort. Other days, the wind would whip them back and forth, and it was a real strain on their roots just to hold on. Sometimes a gentle rain would fall, bringing relief for a short while. Other times, the gentle rain would turn into a vicious storm and pound against the seedlings. Nights would be nice for a while, but due to their exposed position on the side of the steep hill, the nights would very quickly turn cold. There were also the days that the side of the steep hill was a nice place to be. On these days, the 8 that were so quick to complain were just as quick to start laughing and joking. The 2 seedlings that had not been complaining would wonder at these sudden changes brought on by outside conditions. Because of these conditions, the seedlings were growing very strong. As time passed, they could progress from seedlings to saplings and from saplings to young trees. From their elevated position, the young trees would watch the other trees down in the sheltered valley. Sometimes there was envy as the 8 complainers talked about the trees in the valley. Then all talk would stop when the planter of the valley would come through the valley checking his trees. The bigger and nicer ones he would uproot and move to a special place in the valley. There they were sheltered from any bad conditions and given carefully prepared nourishment. Their limbs were groomed for looks every day. When the trees reached maturity, their beauty was beyond compare. "Those sure are some lucky trees," sighed one of the 8. "Yeah, but wonder what happened to the ones that have grown up," asked another. "Look," one of the 8 excitedly whispered, "we'll find out now because he's moving one out." Sure enough, the planter of the valley moved one of the full-grown trees out of the shelter. "Why, he's planted them right next to the path that runs through the valley," one of the 8 exclaimed. After the tree had been transplanted by the path, the planter of the valley disappeared for a time. "Wonder what he's going to do now," one of the 8 asked. Very carefully he began covering the tree with beautifully designed silver and gold. Upon completion of his work, the planter of the valley stepped back to admire his work. The way the sun glistened and shimmered on the silver and gold brought a gasp from the 8. And at that moment, the envy that had been in their voices, in the voices of the 8, went into their hearts. For days, the hillside trees watched the people that walked the path through the valley, stopping and admiring the beautiful trees. Soon the shade cast by this tree was covered with smiling, laughing people. All the other shade was ignored because the beauty of this tree made its shade the place to be. As the planter of the valley added more mature trees and covered them with silver and gold, their shade immediately filled with people. More and more the planter of the valley would now stop his work and stare up at the 10 trees on the hillside, because even though the climb up to them was steep and rough, a few people would make the climb just to rest in their shade. As the 10 trees slowly matured on the hillside and cast more and more shade of their own, a different type of people began to walk the path. These people seemed to actually enjoy the exercise of climbing up through the 10 trees on the hillside. The shimmering and glistening trees of the valley still attracted the vast crowds, but the planter of the valley seemed irritated when he saw the people in the shade cast by the 10. Then one night, while everything was still and peaceful, the 10 trees watched the planter of the valley climb up to them. For a while he stood and admired them, telling the 10 how beautiful they would be in his valley. The planter of the valley told them he would cover them with silver and gold, and then they too would shimmer and glisten and attract large crowds. Then reaching down, he began to pull and tug on one of the 10. With a surprisingly small amount of strain, the planter of the valley uprooted this tree. The next morning, the remaining 9 watched as the planter of the valley took special care with their former brother. He placed him in a choice spot by the path and covered him with the finest silver and gold. The remaining complainers oohed and awed about his beauty, but a feeling of foreboding came over the 2. "Isn't he beautiful?" exclaimed the 7. "Yes, but our master warned us to remain here," the 2 warned. "You 2 just don't understand," the 7 argued. "How proud we would make him if he returned and found us covered in silver and gold with a vast crowd of people in our shade. And besides, will he return? He said that when we were ready he would return. Why hasn't he returned then? For surely we are full grown in stature." "What else do we need?" grumbled the 7. No amount of pleading from the 2 seemed to make any difference. The 7 still envied their brother shimmering and sparkling in the valley. The next night the planter of the valley made the climb up to the remaining 9 trees on the hillside. Again he spoke enticing words to them, and again with ease he plucked up one of the complainers. The next morning the remaining 8 watched as this tree was planted and then covered with silver and gold. The planter of the valley continued climbing the hillside every night until all 8 complainers had been plucked up from the hillside and replanted in the valley. As the 2 remaining trees looked down on their shimmering brothers, they wondered what their destiny would be. "Do you think the planter of the valley would try to uproot us?" one tree asked the other. "I'm sure he will," the other answered with conviction. "But he will not succeed," they declared, "for we have grown strong in this exposed hillside. Let us intertwine our roots, and together we will be even stronger." Then, whispering encouragement to each other, the two watched and waited as the darkness settled over the valley. As soon as it was full dark, the planter of the valley labored up the hillside to the two remaining trees. Murmuring words of enticement, he reached down and pulled and tugged on one of the two. Harder and harder he pulled and yanked, but the tree would not budge. Reaching over, the planter of the valley grabbed the other tree. He jerked and yanked and sweated and cursed, but neither tree would turn loose. The planter of the valley had grown used to plucking trees up from the loose, soft soil in the valley. The soil on the hillside was rocky and solid for this reason, coupled with the fact that their roots were intertwined. The planter of the valley worked himself into a rage, trying to uproot the two. Finally, with a scream of rage, he began beating against them with hatred brought on by futility. He began to stone them, but soon it became evident to him that he could not destroy these two trees. So, mumbling curses, the planter of the valley stalked back down the hill. The relief of the two trees was short-lived, for shortly they saw the planter of the valley returning, and in his hands was what the trees feared most. For lighting up the night were torches with hungry flames throwing sparks in all directions. The planter of the valley stopped directly below the two hillside trees. "How much good will your strength do you now?" he shouted. With a gleeful shout, he began throwing the flaming torches toward the two trees. Torch after torch lit up the night as they arched upward to where the two fearfully stood. Most of the torches bounced and clattered on the rocky soil beneath the two trees. So intent was the planter of the valley on destroying these two trees, he did not notice that several of the torches rolled back down into the valley. Because the soil was rocky, there was not much brush and grass around the two hillside trees, so the fire spread slowly. But down below in the fertile valley there was much brush and stubble for a hungry fire to feed on, and within a very short time a fire was roaring through the valley. Now, instead of sunlight to cause the trees of the valley to shimmer and sparkle, there was firelight. "Save us," the trees cried to the planter of the valley, but fear and despair was on the face of the planter of the valley. With one more look of hatred at the two hillside trees, he turned and ran down the valley. The trees he had planted there were left to their fate. Fanned by a wind created by his own heat, the fire soon devoured everything in the valley that would burn. As the sun peeked over the hill the next morning, it revealed a black, treeless valley. Gone were the beautiful trees that had shimmered and sparkled by the path. The vast crowds of people that had laughed and talked in the shade cast by these trees had disappeared. Nothing had survived in the valley. Up on the hillside stood two blackened figures. The terrible heat from the valley had stripped them bare of all their larger limbs. Where their bark had bent, there now was only black scales. Shamefully they looked at each other. "How terrible we look," they whispered to one another. "What will the master planter say when he sees us now? How horrible we look." "If we could only hide, we would not bring shame to our master," one tree said. "But there is no place to hide," the other tree answered. Then, much to their horror, the master planter strolled over the hill. He stood and silently surveyed the bare, black valley. Then he walked over and slowly eased around the two scorched, heartbroken trees on the hillside. Then a smile spread across his face, and with a gleeful clap of his hands, the master planter exclaimed, "Perfect! I couldn't ask for two nicer trees." Then, reaching inside his robe, he brought out a container of salve. I wonder if that was the balm of Gilead. I don't know. To the amazement of the two trees, he began to rub this salve all over their blackened bodies. As the master's hand lovingly rubbed away the dull black bark, a shimmering and a sparkling began. The more he rubbed, the more dazzling it became, until when he finished, their brightness filled the valley. Then the master planter stood back, and he admired the two trees, which were now two figures of the purest gold and the finest silver. Amen. Amen. My wife, she came back into it, and she wrote down the things that had jumped out at her. And it won't take but about 5 minutes, so if you don't mind, I'm going to read this to you. She said the 10 trees were not ordinary trees. They were 10 chosen trees. They were in the minority. The master planter very carefully chose their place of planting. It was very important that they remain where the master planter planted them. He was speaking of the walk, not necessarily the place. He left them with a warning to beware of the words of the evil one. And some of the scripture she had was Matthew 22:14, James 1:2-4, and verse 12. 80% of the trees started grumbling in just a short time. 80% of the trees started envying the easy life they observed in the valley. She's got 2 Timothy 1:13-18, and 2 Timothy 2:23-26, and 3:1-9, and Proverbs 16:25. All right, number 4. The trees of the valley were planted and covered with gold and silver right by the path so they could be seen and draw people into their shade. This caused envy in the hearts of 8 of the hillside trees, the grumblers and the complainers. 1 Peter 3:1-6 and James 2:1-13. The planter of the valley began to notice the hillside trees whenever people began to put out the extra effort to make the climb up the dam. 2 Timothy 3:12. The planter of the valley came to them at night under the cover of darkness. He spoke enticement and appealed to vanity. The trees without strong roots were plucked up with hardly any effort. 1 Peter 5:8-9, 1 Timothy 4:1-2. And I wrote down here, beware the ones speaking words of endurement when inside they are ravenous wolves. Number 7, when the 2 remaining trees could not be uprooted, the planter of the valley purposed to destroy them by fire. In doing so, the trees of the valley were destroyed along with all of their gold and silver. The same fire revealed the silver and gold of the hillside trees. 1 Peter 3:13-17, 1 Peter 4:12, Luke 14:11, and Luke 18:14. And I wrote down here, inner beauty of pure silver and gold that is revealed by pruning, then burning away of dross in wood, hay, and stubble. Number 8, the master planter was pleased with the shame and humiliation caused by the fire. He rubbed his healing salve over their damaged bodies and brought forth pure gold and silver from within them that they did not know was there. Their beauty was for the master planter alone. 1 Peter 5:10. There must be heat, or there must be fire to bring forth gold, to bring forth pure gold. And Revelations 3:18. So that was some of the observations my lovely wife made. Amen. That's it.